Having had enough insults, embarrassment, and saliva, I took 3 more steps back, took a momentary look on their faces, and turned around to leave. I will never walk this road again, not in the foreseeable future. My appetite for the goods I had in the nylon was gone. The excitement and nervousness for a girl pursuit, gone. The familiarity game along with Project Rita, gone. I had just my 2 legs, with my sense of direction left with me to take me back to my house. I was certain the time would be somewhere close to 8 p.m., but nonetheless, the least of my concerns. I imagined a scenario where this occurrence could have been in my favor, and I wished I could just strangle them both. But I was already backing them and doing my best to keep my head up. I hissed repeatedly as I began to add one step and another away from them. Bastard! Vamos from this side ASAP. Idiot, make I no use eye see you for this side again, or you go collect wetin you no like. Fool. As I shamefully walked away, his voice was neither receding nor increasing. Having walked about 30 meters away from the horror, I felt footsteps advancing quickly and closer to me. In a bit of confusion, I turned my head to get a picture of whatever it is still tugging on my attention here. What I met was not what I expected. Apparently, the short guy had been following me briskly and decided he had to crown his and his guy's win with an action that threw me back years. Before I could turn around, he landed a thunderous slap across the back of my neck and scampered back with a finger pointed at me. In a shock, I stopped on my track. First, I heard Rita and her mom scream, "Jesus!" Then came the rush of feelings. This time, not pain, and unexpectedly, not fear. All I felt in a surge was enough. The afternoon was bright, and we had just finished our basic technology exam. The hunger pang I was having was huge, and we had another 2 hours before dining time. There were about 7 of us heading to the same hostel. All of us were in the same class. It was a usual practice then to cross-check answers with classmates after the exams in order to establish how many one answered correctly. This was the routine after every subject, and basic technology was one subject I usually excel in. So, when I discovered that I had missed 2 answers in the objective session, all the excitement that followed me from the exam hall disappeared. While we were kids and had very little experience of life, we still had our boundaries. Usually, when we are angry at, say, not getting the 200 naira that it promised us, or not going to play street ball in the evening, our boundary might be that none of our friends should laugh at that moment. Most of us had serious boundaries when it gets to our surname. In fact, a typical kid then doesn't want his classmate calling him by his surname, let alone when he or she is angry. I was no exception. Hence, when I discovered that I was already 2 marks off total 70, the last thing I needed was any of my mates calling out my name, whichever part in mockery. Yet, in defiance, Chris decided it was the best time to call me by Astiaba. I had earlier gone few steps ahead of the group in dissociation and in anger. How Chris came up with totally ignoring my private moments and lurking behind me to consistently mention my surname annoyed me even more. I urged him once or twice to stop that I do not like it, but he didn't. In the usual kid's way, He even amplified it and was enjoying himself getting me angrier. By the time I took the unusually high 4-step staircase that led to our hostel front door, I was already fuming internally with rage. Yet, Chris never let out. In fact, he had somehow coined my surname into some music beat and was singing it behind me. Chris was skinny, tall, and not visually strong. He had that feature of a kid that you know will nearly always lose a fist fight to any of his mates. However, what baffled me then, and still baffles me till now, was that he was always the guy looking for trouble. An attitude that seems common with kids of his type. And yeah, he always gets beaten, sometimes to stupor. There's nearly never a day that will pass that you do not see or hear Chris was in a fight and got whooped. He has a circle of friends that defend him most times, but they are the ones that does the beating sometimes. So, had I taken cognizance of where he was coming from, his attitude, his usual fate in fights, and that this is just what gets him going, I may have ignored him and continued to my hostel corner. But as at that moment, I was angry. I was infuriated. My fists were clenched, and I wasn't thinking. Hence, when I felt him advance a bit closer behind me singing my surname, I turned around so fast and punched him under the jaw. Either I punched him harder than I thought, or Chris was indeed way physically weaker than I imagined, because when he collapsed on the floor, it was the least thing the other kids cheering us to fight were expecting. When Chris got up from the floor moments later, he met a number of faces gathered around him, mine inclusive. Some of the more mature kids around us had managed to keep the many other ones far from the scene in order to enable ventilation. My fear was lifted when he let out a small laughter, revealing his lower dentition soaked in his own blood. I had just punched blood out of this kid's mouth, and all he is doing is smile. This was the thought that ran through my head. Before the scene filtered away, one of his close friends was already drumming into my ear how I shouldn't have reacted that way. That everyone knows that Chris looks for trouble a lot, even though he usually ends on the bad side of the quarrel. That my reaction could have resulted to something more serious. Yes, he was right. If I had given it a thought for a moment, I wouldn't have landed a fist on Chris. However, he stopped singing my surname and never did. He never crossed me again, ever. And somehow, I moved to a category of people he doesn't mess with. As my thought brought me back to this unfolding horrible night, another surge of feeling engulfed me immediately. Anger. Why did he scurry away? The question shot in my mind. Why? Chris's incident 13 years ago was instinctual reaction. This night, I'll need to be intentional. I'll need to not think, not a moment gap to run anything through my thought process. There was now enough anger surging through my mind that I could feel my heartbeat racing, and my body was beginning to heat up from inside so much that I could feel my face soak up with sweat. I felt stuck at one spot that for an entire minute I couldn't move any of my foot forward or backwards. The nylon had already fallen off my hand at the impact of his palm across my neck, and the darkness covering that empty and lonely section of the road made it a little less encouraging to care about it. With my eyes red and still affixed to the spot, I watched intently as the figure of the guy that slapped me swaggered back to his friend. I saw as they shook hands and he patted the tall one on the back. For a brief moment it seemed normalcy had returned. The tall one resumed his seat, and the short guy stood around the fireplace somehow, waiting for Rita. I took a glance at where Rita and her mom were standing before. The figure I saw wasn't hers, but that of her mom, who now started moving to the sales table. Maybe indeed normalcy and peace had returned, but not for me. For the first time in 3 minutes, I shifted my position and moved closer to the nearby bushes. Be intentional but stay angry, I told myself. I groped my side and back pocket for my phone and my wallet. Pulling the two out, I pressed down on the side button of my phone until the screen showed shut down and reboot. Swiping up on the shutdown portion, I bundled the two together with my earpiece and flung them into the bush. No going back now. My steps now were faster and more directed. The first person to notice me coming back was Rita's mom. Even from 20 meters away, I could tell from the surprise on her face that she knew my coming back has got nothing to do with her sales. Rita had materialized again, this time at the front of their house. Enough distance from what is coming, I remarked in my head. I could tell that she had as well seen me, but the determination and the anger in me had occupied so much room that there was little left to care about her. Then, the short guy, observing Rita's mom, now noticed me. Then, the tall guy. As I expected, the tall one was the first to jump over the benches and charged towards me. This guy, you get mine come back here, eh? You get mine come back, you know they fear. You true want see something, ba? But what he failed to take into account was that I was done listening to talks. Perhaps, if he had been just a bit observant, he'd had noticed the twitches of anger across my forehead and my clenched fist. But it was late. As he advanced towards me past this guy, my fist clenched tighter, and I slowed down to let him get arm's length close to me. Then, in a flash, I launched my forehead towards his nose. The heat was both eyes. One. Then, I paused for that momentary recovery that would expose the side of his face. Then it came. Without hesitating, I landed my fist hard enough on his right chin. Lights out. Chaos.